Hey everyone, Alicia Bakramudrak here today. I'm a white female located in Southwest Florida wearing an awesome yellow possum sweatshirt. And I am here with some really special guests. This month, we are trying something new on Tuesday Tea. Usually, you just see myself on here, but my dear friend Melissa, who's been a guest a few times, is going to hop on and co host with me for the next three episodes for this month and hopefully beyond. So I'm going to let her just reintroduce herself in a minute. But this month, we're really talking through this idea of the summer of self and how to really live authentically on our own terms. So I'm so excited about the guest we have as well today, who's really going to dive deeper into what that sort of like looks like for her, sort of like subtopic on that we'll get into in a minute. I'll let everyone introduce themselves first. But I'm so excited to be here with you all and welcome back. So Melissa, take it away.
Hey everyone, Melissa Levine here. I am a white female hailing from Chicago. I am wearing a beanie and a sweatshirt, and my hair is very frizzy. So
But
you know,
beautiful.
I come as I am. And yeah, I'm really excited. As Alicia said, I've known her for many years, and I've really enjoyed doing this with her a couple of times. And so, when we talked about the possibility of me kind of doing a few more and co-hosting, we thought like, of why wouldn't I? I think this like feeds my soul in lots of ways to just have these like connections and these conversations with you. I feel like sometimes I leave like feeling like therapy, but like without the tears. So that feels really good. Um, and yeah, I'm super excited about our guest today. I've known her for a few years. It's my
Okay.
sister. She is my younger sister and is incredible. And I will let her introduce herself. But I'm just really excited to hear from her more about this idea of joy as a resistance and as a form of like resistance in this world. And I think she's done a lot of work around cultivating this value in her life. And she is often a model of like the way I want to live my life in a lot of ways. And
Hmm.
so, without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Amy Kenny.
Thanks, Liz, and thank you, Alicia, for having me. I am Amy Kenny. I am a disabled white woman wearing green and am sitting with a teal wool behind me because it brings me joy. I
Beautiful.
am in DC, Washington, DC, where I work as the inaugural director of the Disability Cultural Center at Georgetown University. And I'm excited to be with you today to talk about all things joy as resistance.
Yeah. I'm excited too. If we could just like, I would love to just ask a question to kind of kick it off. Um, you and I have talked a lot in our lives about, as adults, we've gotten into these like really good, deep co conversations and topics. And one thing that you told me once is that you see joy as actually like a form of resistance in your life as a disabled woman, and how you sort of navigate the world and the expectations maybe that the world puts on you as a person with a disability, and how that might impact your value of like wanting to show up with joy in spaces where maybe people expect that you shouldn't for whatever reason.
I think that joy is really disruptive. It disrupts
Mm,
expectations, especially that folks have of being a disabled woman. If you think about the examples that we have of disability in pop culture or in Disney movies, even, we're often the bad guys, right? We're often
mm,
villains. It's as though we have something against the world, and disability is conflated with having this vendetta and wanting to get back at the world. Looking at you, Darth Vader, right? Or Captain Hook, or even Wonder Woman, which I adore. The villains in Wonder Woman are all disabled.
mm,
Anytime there's a Batman villain, they're disabled.
mm.
So we're coded to, we being disabled folks are coded as villainous. And I think another way that we're coded is really tragic. And the villainy comes out of that tragic, sad disposition. So being joyful as a disabled woman isn't just about me wanting to, keep my peace and find joy in the everyday in my life, but it also disrupts people's expectations and projections of what they expect disabled folks to be.
Hmm. And
Wow.
I'm thinking too, on one level, I think women who are joyful just in general, that already is like a strike. Women are taught like you shouldn't, anytime I work with a lot of especially moms or a lot of my clients in my practice are women, people identify as women. And there's always so much guilt around doing things that bring them joy, right? And so already just as a female, someone who identifies as female, is socialized as female, there's a lot of uh, guilt and stigma around, well, don't be too happy or don't be too indulgent or don't be too joyful. And then adding in this layer of being a woman and then with disability and this idea of what you've thrown in of that socialization around folks with disability and how we view that, like what an even greater hill to climb, so to speak, in the face is like two different camps of maybe how you identify that both have these very big messages of like, oh, but like, should you have joy? Like, should you feel okay with that? So that's kind of coming
Yeah.
to mind too.
It's amplified, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so ubiquitous that folks will even ask a question, what's your guilty pleasure? I don't have a
Mm,
guilty pleasure because I don't
I
feel
just have
guilt
pleasure.
about having joy.
Yeah.
That's, ooh, that's so powerful. It reminds me of like these things where we've just they've become so synonymous with just like it's a euphemism, right? Like we don't think of them as harmful, but saying guilty pleasure, just that tiny phrase, is so harmful because it's enforcing this that we should have guilt or oh like
Around a
oh
pleasure.
I shouldn't want to be doing things that bring me joy or pleasure. And that is, man, it that just kind of hit me deep. I think last time Leash, you and I talked about how even like changing little languages, like phrases like if you want to have kids, if you want to get married instead of the
The
when aims,
when.
like that is so harmful. And like as someone, you both you are like these powerhouse, amazing women who have chosen not to have kids. And I will go to my grave saying this is one of the bravest, most disruptive things you can do as a woman because no one is more of a woman or less of a woman if no matter what they decide to do, right? And that's like maybe a whole nother like think topic for another time. Um, but that idea of like just changing our language slightly and being so intentional about the phrases we use, like I I have said guilty pleasure before, and now I feel like I want to like be more intentional of not saying that because I shouldn't feel guilty. And it's not even just me, right? Then it's like I'm passing that messaging down to my kids, and then now here goes another generation that thinks
Mm-hmm.
it's guilt worthy to have just sit down and enjoy binge watching The Secret Lives of Mormon
I was
Wives, which
just gonna
I
say that was the
actually
right choice
do
of
love that show. I
example.
just binge watched it.
It's so good.
Delightful.
So good.
Um,
We could have a whole talk on that show.
yeah.
Um,
And then the things that are typically feminized, the pleasures, the
yeah.
experiences, the joys that are typically feminized. And of course, joys don't have a gender, but watching a TV show such as that then becomes less serious, or that somehow takes away from
Mm,
your other attributes, your intelligence, your
mm,
capabilities,
Yeah.
your accolades, that
hmm.
somehow those are separated. And that's just nonsense.
Yeah.
We've cultivated that, we have constructed that, we can tear it on down. And
That's
I
like you
think,
silly woman. You like reality
yes,
TV shows.
being a disabled woman means living in the reality of knowing that many people have decided that you're better off dead than disabled. And that's a really harsh way of saying it, but that's actually been
True.
said to my face.
Wow.
Folks will approach me in the grocery store, at the library, at any setting, and say things to me such as, "Ah, good for you for getting out and about. I'd kill myself if I had what you had." What? You don't know what I have. You don't know me. You don't know
You
anything
don't know
about
anything.
me.
Yeah.
So, and then, often it comes with a nice little pat on the head like I'm a dog. And that is rooted in a really ableist notion that it is better to be dead than to be disabled.
Hmm.
It
Yeah,
also
how,
reinforces like in ableism. there's this expectation that it good for you for getting out and about. It's like, well, if the world was actually more accessible, I would be able to get out and about without absolutely any difficulty at all, because there's nothing wrong with my body. There's something wrong with the system that has decided that stairs are the best way to enter, when actually stairs are problematic for moms and with strollers and with people that use
Elderly
walkers
folks.
or wheelchairs, or
Yeah.
yeah, people that just are carrying a lot of things, or you
Anyone
know what I
with
mean?
banqueting equipment, sound equipment,
Correct.
anyone
It's just
My
traveling.
like
legs at the end of
actually
a hard day.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like a
right.
styrene. Yeah.
So I think it feeds into that, I think, even more so when they say those kinds of things, right? Because it's not, it's the added layer of that there's this expectation that it's hard for you to get around, but it actually is hard for you to get around because our world is not created a lot of times for you to get around. Um, yeah, I was just thinking about that when you said that.
Yeah, and it shows how deep that ableism goes
Yeah.
because generally, when you get somewhere, you travel from A to B, you're sitting down and you have wheels propelling you to go faster. We call it a bus, a bike, a car, a
Right.
train, the metro. But when
Hmm.
I do it and it's called my wheelchair or my mobility scooter, it's inherently tragic. What?
Hmm.
Make it make sense. That doesn't
Right.
make sense. And so my mobility scooter is bedazzled with a W for Wonder Woman. I tell people her name is Diana, Princess of the Mascuda, so that you remember who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And just having joy in my mobility devices is alarming to people because those are often so coded in medical and tragic ideology
Hmm. Hmm.
that there's no concept that a mobility device could be freedom.
Yeah. And you,
Yes.
it sounds like you're giving a little bit of example here, but I guess on a bigger scale for that question, I was curious, like, what are some concrete ways that you have found you can sort of reclaim your joy in the face of all these adversities? And I'm sure that you do have days that are hard and that you have, like challenge bigger mental challenges to overcome. We all don't wake up every day like my life is wonderful, no matter what kind of shit we have going on, right? So I guess just like what has worked for you to really sort of like live that authentic self on your own terms, like be rooted in this idea of joy that maybe isn't always happiness, but like how do you practice that in a tangible way, sort of in your day to day?
One of the first things I do in the morning after my first coffee is because I'm a much more pleasant person after that,
Yeah, fair.
is say something that I'm grateful for that has happened in the past 24 hours. So you can't cheat and say something like, "Oh, my spouse or my friends," or something that are sort of evergreen that you might
Hmm.
be grateful for in the abstract. It has to be something concrete. So I'm grateful for my fuzzy socks, or I'm grateful that my friend brought me a baklava mocha yesterday from my
Mm-hmm.
favorite bakery, or I'm
Hmm.
Get
I'm
back to that
grateful.
later. That sounds
I know. It's
delightful.
like, tell me more.
I'm grateful for 5 minutes of silence between two heavy meetings, whatever it might be. And I think that cultivating gratitude really connects with our ability to experience joy and cultivate joy.
Mm,
I think there are real world difficulties in our lives, and I think joy doesn't erase those. It's not toxic positivity.
Mm.
But the way that I have found to stay connected to joy is really to be connected to my gratitude for what is happening in the here and now. What can I feel? What can I taste? What can I sense?
mm,
And how can I really remain grounded in that?
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
love that. Alicia and I have talked a lot about gratitude too, and just how like that simple practice. And sometimes we're looking for these big, grandiose things that like, and it's not that. Sometimes it literally is a hot cup of coffee. And those are few and far between. Sometimes, like because you put it down, you keep you're doing a million things. Um, so I think that's a beautiful practical thing that everyone can do that. Like everyone has that's two
something.
seconds. And when
Yeah.
you, as soon as you open your eyes, and I love that you're doing it like right away, first thing in the morning, I think that sort of sets your intention then. If nothing else goes right, you've already been you grateful, and that already is going to lead into more ability to create or cultivate joy throughout the day, right? Because it's like when you work out, the more you work out, the better your results get. And I think that's true of any kind of mindfulness activity. I don't know if, how you think about that, Ames, or like how long you've been doing that. Um, do you see a difference in like days that maybe you haven't done that? And how does that impact your ability to like do it? Or are you able to like reset throughout the day? If you're, you know what I mean? Like when did you start that practice? I guess that's my question.
I started that practice a few years ago consciously, and I try to hold to it and not in a way that is rooted in shame. Oh, I must do this, but
Right.
in an invitational way.
And like I get to do this. I get to say something I'm grateful for.
Yes.
Hmm.
And I think that it's also connected to a practice of, and this sounds probably silly, but going outside every day.
Mhm.
And our lives are so technology based
Hmm.
now. And it's often that you go from meeting to meeting to, presentation, and then you're worrying about what's for dinner and how do I get my errands done? And you're trying to schedule everything, and just making sure that I have some connection with nature every day is
Mm.
also a practice that I have. Now, some days that's easier than others because I now live in a part of the world that does actually have winter. So
Yes.
I don't have to tell Chicago over here. Sometimes it's not enjoyable to go outside,
Yeah.
but can I look at a picture of a tree on my phone? Can I watch a video of a kangaroo hopping? Can I admire a whale in the ocean? And I think just connecting with something that is bigger than me and something that is not rooted in our hustle culture and in our
Mm.
systems, I think is
Mhm.
really a really helpful practice for me to stay connected to my joy.
Mhm. And a lot of this is like the psychology piece of it. Like our brains are trained to see the negative to protect us, right? Like, is the tiger coming? Where's the food? Is there danger? Like, we are wired to survive. We do not, our bodies want to stay alive at all costs. And so it's maladaptive though when that gets um, due to maybe traumas, other experiences, like that alarm bell can stay stuck on, or it can come on way too quickly and too severely in situations that it doesn't need to, or we are, for survival reasons, have to always be on alert for the negative. We all have our own stories and reasons. But the reason things like the three good things, gratitude journal, even like connection to a larger experience work is because it's now training our brain that while it is important and it will always go to that primitive default space, we're also encouraging it to spend some energy looking for the good, looking for what's right, like acknowledging and recognizing what's going well, what's safe, what's kind, what's not hurting us. Because there's always the yin and the yang, right? Like nothing is all bad, just like nothing is all good. There's always a little bit of everything. Without bad, we don't even know what good is. Without sad, we don't know what happy is, right? Like you need a bit of both. Um, and so I do think it's just this beautiful scientific thing that does work is just simply by writing something down, acknowledging something, because our brain gets used to it and it starts to go there maybe first or at least a quick second instead of only just staying in the stuck and the bad and the what isn't working and what's going to hurt me.
Mhm.
And so I think it's such a simple in the terms of it doesn't take a lot of time, money, too much energy, but the rewards are tenfold. And also, what a beautiful just habit to develop. We have so many less helpful habits that we so quickly, sign up for. So why not something that can really enrich our lives and then also impact other people's, right? When we're in a more better space, others in our orbit get the better version of us and so on. So I love these reminders of these really beautiful, impactful practices that go such a long way, you know?
I like your
Yeah,
idea
no.
too, Ames, to make sure that it happens within that 24 hours and that it's not just like you can't just say every day, like, I'm grateful for my family. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, like that's great. And like I am grateful for my family. Some days they wouldn't be at the first of my list, I'll tell you that for free. But just kidding, this one would be. But I think it's really important to be super intentional and get granular when you're thinking about these things because we do just sometimes if we're really trying to develop a habit that impacts, has like, is a high leverage of impact, then you do have to make it more specific or more concrete or really do it because like saying like, oh, I'm grateful that I'm alive, that starts to now feel like we're just running through the motions and it starts to, I think, like lose its impact. And then it becomes kind of to your point, Ames, earlier, like now we're just checking something off a list to say, oh, I'm grateful today. I've practiced my gratitude.
Mhm.
So I liked that. And I think that's something that I would like to incorporate into that when I do practice do practice of gratitude, I would like to make sure that I'm doing it more like, okay, it has to be something that happened last night. It has to be something that happened within this 24-hour period. I think that's a really smart.
It also allows us to reclaim our humanity. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, when we feel at a loss to be able to experience, name, or connect with our joy, I think we're robbed of our humanity in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And naming that I have joy, and maybe it's in spite of whatever we're experiencing or whatever systems of oppression there are that we're up against, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever difficulties there have been in that moment in our day. It allows for us to practice, but that doesn't get to define me. Other folks'
Right.
limited notions of disability do not define who I am or my capacity to experience my life.
Mm.
I get to fully experience my life, and I'm not asking permission from anyone to do that. And
Yeah.
I think it cultivates a muscle memory of where we're going. We're not just critiquing what is, we're not just trying to have people not say those negative, ableist, harmful things to me. We want to create a community and a culture where we're all flourishing. And
Mm.
if we don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to live in that culture and community, what are we going to do when we get there? We're going to
Yeah.
be so busy critiquing what has been instead of recognizing the future that we want to co-create and
Mm.
imagining how we can create that in micro moments together.
Mm. All I'm picturing right now is like someone just like doing this, like looking over their back shoulder and like about to walk into a wall or missing something really beautiful in front of them because they're just so focused on all the wrong things, right? Not to say we shouldn't learn from our past or there should be some moments for reflection, but I do agree. It feels like we're in such a space where we're not actually just seeing what is there and what is possible and what's in front of us. There's just we're just looking in all the wrong places, it feels, in so many different ways. And so I don't know, that image, just this person just walking with their head like turned around is like what came to mind while you were speaking.
So true. I think in today, sort of where we are in the world today, it's like a strange time to be alive. And I think it can be quite hard to stay grounded in like the positive or the joy when you do have so many um just like a lot of
Negative
really
things.
terrible things are happening in the world, particularly, I mean, I'd like to like acknowledge like they're not actually happening to me in the same regularity that they're happening to a huge chunk of the population, right? So I wanted to acknowledge that, and I can see it. It doesn't have to be happening to me for me to recognize that that's happening. And so I can understand why people sometimes get so bogged down in that. And that's why I think I know as someone with anxiety, like sometimes the crippling, like I get crippled by like inaction or just like I have to like sit here now. I can't do anything because I'm so overwhelmed. And it's like
Mm,
sometimes taking that first step is what you need to do and you need to do it, but like you literally can't take it. And so that's why I like these small little things that we can do um in order to you might not get there right away. You might not get there every day, but at least you're like making those moves to try to get there. And I think that's important and that's disruptive in its own way, is like it is easy to be paralyzed by inaction when things feel so heavy. And that's we can't live in that place. And there are actually, like to your point, Alicia, like this, there's so many small micro moments that are happening that are really beautiful, despite all of the ugly things that are sort of happening globally. Um, so I think that's why I think I'm really coming back to these ideas of these small manageable steps and that both of those things you mentioned, Ames, are really, I think, really doable for everybody, no matter like where you are in the world, no matter what you have going on. Like everyone has a few moments where they can do those things. Something I've been doing too, and you made me think of it when you mentioned like the nature connection. I've been trying to just like, I know this is so like hippie and like so I'm like, am I a hippie now? What's going on? I love going out when I can. Obviously, in Chicago right now, it's actually raining right now, but it has been nice. And just like going out and standing in my backyard and putting my bare feet on grass. And I know it's like grounding is such a popular thing. And I'm not at all saying I know anything about it, but there is something to like being out and like having
There
the
is.
sunshine on me. And it just, I don't know, it could be like 30 seconds, it could be a minute, whatever I have, but that is another thing that feels like super doable that helps me.
There's
Yes,
definitely science behind it. I don't know all the
Mhm.
numbers, but
Yeah.
there's something very scientific that happens when you spend time in nature, even for a small amount of
Yeah.
time, or literally have your feet
Mhm.
on the earth. So it's,
Yeah, I've heard that in
not
some like
hippy dippy or anything. It's like real.
no,
It's like
but
very
in
like
some like
real. It should
Eastern
be
medicines,
normalized.
like Japan, they will like prescribe you to go take a walk in nature. Like when you go to the doctor, of course, like there's medicines for when you're actually like sick and you need something, but their first course of action will often be like you need to go to the ocean and like dip your feet into the salt water, or
Yep.
like you need to go for a walk in the forest and like experience that connection. And I think there's something to that. And I think, in our culture, it's just it's not that way. And so I think we do have to like sort of disruptively go against sort of how we're created and how we've been socialized and make some of those small changes that we can. I think it can be really helpful when we do those things.
what I receive in that too is that it taps into the abundance that is already around us. I think so often when we are in an emotional state or a
Mm,
responsive state that is not connected to joy, we are really perpetuating the scarcity mentality, right?
Mm.
And that we're all against each other and we're all fighting for limited resources.
yeah.
And I think when we connect with nature, when we connect with the earth, with other animals, with other humans, that allows for us to be reminded that actually we have abundant resources to be able to connect with joy. And I recognize that there's a lot of privilege that in that, but I
Mhm.
think making sure that even in our mindset, we're not robbed of recognizing the abundance of the sun or the ocean
Yes.
or the earth and going
Yes.
outside, that
Hmm.
can be a way that we're building bridges and allowing for ourselves to actually get to experience what joy can be.
I
Um,
love that.
Amy, I have a question. How have you been able to identify what joy sort of even means to you and like things that bring you joy? Because I know I've used the word a lot, but maybe there's someone who's like, I don't even know what that really is, or like, I don't know what brings me joy. So I'm just curious how you've been able to connect with that word, what it kind of, how you embody it, and then things that might represent it in your life.
I think joy is an internal and enduring state of contentment and delight. I
Mm,
think it's distinct from happiness, that I think is often linked to external factors or fleeting moments.
hmm.
Happiness can be important or valuable, but I think that it's not as enduring and that it is a little bit more fickle,
Yes.
in when it comes and goes. It's fleeting.
Hmm.
I think happiness also can lead to toxic positivity and to a erasure of the hard and the difficult that we're experiencing on
Mm,
systemic and personal levels. And I
mhm.
think joy is distinct from that in that it doesn't actually rely on external factors to exist. So you can
Mm,
have, in my experience, a lot of joy when you're in a lot of physical pain, when you're dealing with a really difficult situation. There can still be a moment of connection or laughter or deep joy that
yeah.
is in that moment.
Yeah.
And I wonder too if joy comes with a sense of purpose and meaning.
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
a way that maybe happiness doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels a little deeper than happiness, like you're saying, to your point of it being fleeting. It also feels a little surface. It feels dependent on your mood, the time, what's going on around you, like the outside sort of influencers. I agree with that. I really, I think you can have joy, and that's like more of a choice that you're making a commitment rather than like a happy moment. Um, that may include joy and they may sort of be linked. And yet, I think joy is much deeper and much more like intentional choice to live out rather than just like a happy moment um, that could very quickly turn into like a non-happy moment, you know?
So like
Yeah,
a state of
I,
being versus an emotion, because emotions are fleeting. And
yeah.
I don't know if this is real, but Jess King on Peloton told me that an emotion lasts between 8 to 11 minutes or something. And I always knew that. I always say with my clients, like, no feeling is final, things like that. But I didn't really know numbers, but I believe her. She's a coach, so she probably knows what she's talking about. But, like, but that was interesting to me. So if you can like do something hard for 11 minutes, even if you're not necessarily going to be in a better, like a more appealing feeling per se, but the feeling you're in right now will be different in 8 to 11 minutes or whatever that little time frame was. So it is like a nice way to think about stuff. I always say I can do hard things for X amount of time,
Mm.
whatever the length of the thing I'm trying to like. I can be on this plane for however many more hours. I can do hard things and sit here
Mhm.
for 7 more hours or this whatever. So I think that I thought that was interesting, and I think that's that difference where I don't know if joy is as fleeting as happiness.
Mhm.
It does seem like more this state of being, a mindset, a
Mhm.
way. I think we talked last time we talked about this topic too a bit, like in a different capacity, but a value um, versus something happening to us that maybe we don't have as much control over our feelings all the time. Like they are what they are. Whereas joy,
Yep.
we can kind of choose maybe in a different way. Kind of what I'm taking from this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think joy is for you. It's like for you. And I think that's the disruption in it, right? Because we have been socialized as women, particularly, I think. I mean, I can't even imagine as a woman that's also disabled, right? And like that intersectionality and what that does for everyone's ideas about what we should and shouldn't do. But as a woman, just that sheer act of defiance of like, I'm choosing me because these things are what pours into me and fills my spirit. And I don't give a fuck what else that feeds, who cares, what doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. But if it's what makes me feel like my soul is on fire, then I don't really have to explain that to anybody else. And that I think that act of choosing you is really beautiful and empowering and totally defiant and like a big
Mm-hmm.
middle finger to the patriarchy, and which just excites and absolutely delights me. Anytime I have the
That is
opportunity, I'm
Melissa's
ready to
state of
go.
joy.
That literally just flipping off the
See it on her
patriarchy
face
brought
right
me
now.
so much joy. We should get that on a shirt. But yeah, I think I absolutely agree with you. I think and then these you mentioned Ames earlier. I know we probably have to wrap up here, but you mentioned earlier this idea of connection.
Mm.
Um, so with the gratitude, with nature, and big things outside of ourselves, and then this idea of connecting with other humans. And I think um, these these talks are like one way that I feel like that really pours into me, and I feel a lot of joy in just having these really authentic conversations with women that are the same as me, that are different than me, that have, like I just think that's such value add in our lives is to just like have these connections. Um, I don't know, I feel very empowered by being around other women who are also like have lots of opinions and thoughts and like
Mm.
experiences and that I can learn from and grow with. And I think that's something yeah, that I think is really important to cultivate that you. And I think that's like our big theme, right? Is like the summer of you and like making sure that we're able to like find what it is, even like you said, at least that like makes us feel that joy or like what can we do to like even find that out? Because sometimes like we don't know what that is that really or we lose it and we need to find it again. I think that's really important.
Yeah, or we stifle it because we think
Yeah,
that's
it's
what it means to
supposed
be in a relationship, or that's what it means to be a parent, or that's what it means to be a friend, or any number of identities and roles
Yep.
that we take up.
Yeah.
And discovering what brings you joy and
Mm,
why is important because it disrupts expectations
Yeah.
and all of the reasons we've named, but also it allows for you to have that deeper connection with yourself and with a broader community.
mhm,
I've been wondering lately about how do I make sure that my joy doesn't come at the expense of someone else's suffering?
mm,
Because we're often taught that something that could bring us joy is, buying some new clothes or some new shoes. But if that's contributing to fast fashion, is can that really sustain our joy?
mhm.
Or
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
how can we make sure that our joy is really rooted in a sense
Yeah.
of a holistic communal joy?
Yeah.
And not to
I
take
feel
on the
that.
burden of everyone,
No.
everyone else, but to make sure that we are challenging ourselves and disrupting our own expectations or
Yep.
some of the messaging we've received as well in making sure that our joy doesn't come at the expense of beloveds.
No, that's I super wise.
Yeah. And I think then that even goes back to that deeper question of like, well, then is that really joy or is that just pushing like a happiness button or a
Yeah.
empty filling button? And what are my values? And how does joy align with those values? And then how do those values align with the larger world? Right. Like, but I do totally appreciate the reminder of thinking about ourselves in a larger space and our actions
Yeah.
impact everyone. I don't think we all can be quite self-centered. It's, how we also survive, but it's not always helpful. So, I think just having that awareness is so
Yeah.
important and a good little challenge to take away, even just this week, like identifying what brings me joy, how can I live that more authentically, and then what are there any consequences to some of the ways in which I enact that at this time and changes to be made.
Yeah. That's
Um,
yeah, that's really a good thing to think about. Thank you for bringing that up.
you've given us so much, but I'm going to ask it. What might be any last thoughts, little pearls of wisdom, a nice like little takeaway? What do you kind of want to leave folks with at the end of our conversation today?
I think that you are enough. We
Hmm.
are enough. We're so weighed down with everyone else's expectations and projections of who we're supposed to be. And it feels as though we're not even allowed to have joy, as though that's a precious commodity. And so just an invitation to reclaim our joy and humanity together in knowing that we are enough.
Beautiful.
Beautiful,
Well,
Ames. Thank you.
thank you so much. Is there any other like information, things that you'd like to share with folks just if they want to get in touch with you or know more about you or things you're doing in the world?
Not at this time, but stay tuned.
Okay, we will. We so appreciate you being here. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week. Get after this Tuesday, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.